Shalom, I'm Rav Shalom, and this is Rav Yehuda, and this is our third video, and we're going to be discussing Matza for Pesah. Rav Yehuda is going to give us a brief description on certain things as far as the flour is concerned, as far as how many minutes it is to make matzah. If you're making matzah yourself, which the majority of our community we do, we make our own matzah. So he's going to cover all those different aspects, and also cover the aspect of people, certain people in the community cannot afford to purchase the shamor flour because it's extremely expensive and it's very hard to actually get it as well. So we're going to be going over also the different types of flours, and we want to try to stick to using the shamor flour, but in certain cases we won't be able to. So Rav Yehuda will explain what you can do in that process as well. Rav Yehuda?
Okay, thank you, Rav. All right, so I'm going to do my best to make this very concise. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And then check out videos prior to this, because it may be important for you to watch those videos that we posted prior to this, so you have a better understanding of the context. So Masah, what is Masah? Masah is basically bread made from the 5 species. So if you don't know what the 5 species that we're talking about, look at the video before. What is chametz? The matzahs are made from those 5 species that are called chametz, except that it is baked prior to its activation. So again, if you don't understand, watch the video prior. So the first thing you need is flour made from these 5 species of chametz. And so if you get the flour, you have to make sure that the flour has not made contact with water during processing. This flour is called shmura flour. Shmura means washed. And shmura flour basically guarantees the person who's using this flour for the making of masa that they're not knowing, committing a sin. And of course, there's some leeway when you do things. You just want to be safe. You want to err to the side of caution. However, if you're not able to get shmura flour, which is very difficult, like the Rav says, you can use regular flour, and assuming that the flour has not made contact with water. So if you bought flour, we must assume at that time, because that's what we have, you can use that flour to make masa. And this is b'diavad, the use of this flour in this case, because you don't have any other way of doing this. Now, some of you out there might just go out and get some masa from the supermarket. That's fine too. However, like he said, our community usually make our own masa, and ancient masa were made in the homes. They were not made in the factory, and they were not difficult to make. And so the issue was, how long does it take between making the dough of the masa and having it contacted with liquid to before baking? And so a lot of people for the longest time believe it's only 18 minutes. So a lot of people felt uncomfortable making masa at home because they felt like it would become chametz at the time it makes contact with the water and baking. All right, but the truth of it is that so long as you need the masa dough, all right, it remains non-chametz so long as you need it and yet keep playing with it. Those are stringent. Look at the Bavli Talmud and say 18 minutes, which many people who know better believe that the Bavli Talmud is basically a copyist error. When it gives the timing, it's giving the timings of how long the dough might become chametz by a distance of the time it takes to walk one place to another. So if you walk 1 mile, they say in the Bavli Talmud, that's the time it takes for the dough to become chametz. But the Yerushalmi says it makes better sense. And according to the scriptures, we know now that the Yerushalmi Talmud is the more accurate, and most likely the Bavli Talmud has a copyist error in it, and therefore it lends people to believe it's 18 minutes, but 4 times 18 is 72,
Right.
which the Rishami basically suggests, which makes better sense according to Scripture. So if we look at Torah, when the children of Israel left Egypt, they left Egypt with their masa dough in their bags. They had enough time to knead it. So 72 minutes is enough time, not 18. And so let's go on. We also realize that masa in ancient times was not the hard cracker type that you find in stores today. And a lot of us have grown accustomed, more particularly within this century or a century and a half, of buying factory-made masa. And when they first started making factory-made masa, it was basically frowned on or frowned upon by many Jews in their communities. And later on, it became more acceptable, politics and business in mind. And some people feel like to play it safe, it's convenient. Just think about it. You don't have to worry about making a masa. But the downfall is you won't be able to participate fully as the seder will have you, because there's a part of the seder that you would tear the masa, not break it, but tear the masa from one masa, and you take the perusha, all right, and you slide it in the shalema. The perusha means the piece, and you put it in the whole masa, all right. The masa was round, and they were cake-like, they were sponge-like pieces of bread. The other thing about masa for Pesach, you want to have what's called lechem oni. Lechem oni on the Seder night, all right, the night that we remember how the Most High brought us from Mitzrayim into freedom. You want to have lechem oni. Lechem oni is the poor man's bread, because the Torah said we should have the bread of affliction. So on the Seder night, the Seder represents the experiences that we went through. So everything that we do symbolically, we are experiencing that with our ancestors. So that masa oni or lechem oni is poor man's, or the bread of affliction is the afflicted bread. Therefore, many of us in our community like to make our masa with flavors and herbs and spices to make it flavorful. All right. But on the Seder night, that is not the masa we have.
No.
But for the afikoman, meaning at the end of the Seder, the afikoman means dessert. The dessert masa, and the dessert masa starts the feast of masa.
Right.
So the Seder night is the Pesach night, and we partake of the bread of affliction. But the afikoman, the dessert that starts the feast of masa, can be the herbal and good tasting masa. So if you put little herbs in there, little olive oil and spices on that night, the afikoman could be that. And this is the reason why, so to give clarity, some of the children look forward to having the afikoman, all right, the dessert masa, because that was the good tasting masa versus the bad tasting or the plain tasting masa.
And even in the Sephardi communities, they even follow that tradition.
Right,
with
absolutely.
the egg matzo.
Right, they have egg masa during that. So whereas the Ashkenazi would refrain from egg masa or the good tasting masa is called lechem asirah. Lechem asirah means the rich man's masa, all right, or the rich masa, or the rich bread. All right, but because we were slaves in Egypt, the Midrash says that when the Egyptians fed our ancestors, they fed them the plain masa. All right, so you have to remember that if you make your masa, there's two ways of baking it. All right, you can bake it in the oven, all right, or you can bake them in the pan. So we pan baked our masa. It's very effective because you can watch it. And this is the way our ancestors did the masa, especially when they were traveling from Mitzrayim into the wilderness. They pan baked them, and you see this. This is common across the cultures in the East. From Africa to Asia, you see this pan baking, and you can watch it. You can see and you have more control of the Masah, and you want to make sure.
Israel, the Tamani, they still to this day.
All right, so that's what we want to bring into play. Now, in the seder, there's a part called korech. Korech literally means to wrap. So there's a part of the seder, just to add to it, it's a part of the seder where you wrap the korban and the moror, all right, in the Masah. Today, if you would store-bought Masah, you won't be able to wrap it.
You have to break it.
You have to break it.
Crumble it.
All right. And so the benefits of making your Masah, it would be so you can more accurately emulate what was done by our ancestors. So if you have more questions about Masah and Maso, please feel free to ask them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. And at the same time, we have a prayer for those who've been afflicted, for those who've been afflicted by this turmoil and this pandemic, and all those who have not been, we pray that you do not become exposed to this virus, that the Most High, bless and protect all of us during this time. Please be safe, and we hope to hear from you soon.